Hello and welcome to October's All the Everything. Hello and thank you for joining me. And also thank you if you've just joined me for the pre-show party. If you didn't, it's a kind of, oh gosh, yeah, I have gone on a bit this time. It was meant to initially be about a 20-minute conversation in our Facebook group before I start making this. But I enjoy myself so much that this time I've gone on for almost 40 minutes. I was a bit late actually, it's probably just over 30 minutes. So if you didn't join me, first of all, if you did join me, thank you. If you didn't join me this time, do so next time. It's the first Thursday of every month at 5 p.m. British time in our Primal Happiness Facebook group. So I'm saying it now while it's fresh for me and I've just kind of come out of the buzz of it. So yeah, if you didn't join us this time, please do next time. It's really lovely way of actually being able to have conversation rather than me just talking at you, which isn't actually my favorite way to create, although sometimes it's what needs to happen. So this month I've been and ahhing about whether to start as I normally do with what I've been creating and consuming, partly because I hurt my knee really badly at the weekend. It's now infected. And as I'm fighting off that infection, I'm noticing it's really making me feel tired. And so I've already, as I say, been chatting for almost 40 minutes. So I don't think I've got the staying power to do too long a show, including a very long what I've been consuming creating, but I've decided I'm going to just touch on a couple of things. So what I've been consuming this month is a series, and you have to forgive me, it might be Netflix. I never know what anything's on because my husband deals with all things viewing pleasure. Asks me if I would like to watch something, puts it on, and I never know how it's magically arrived on our TV screen. So if it's not Netflix, it'll be some other type of thing that's the equivalent. Anyway, it's called Nine Perfect Strangers. It's got Nicole Kidman in, who, as usual, is just fabulous. And I started watching it because people were mentioning it to me, both at my shamanic training, but also people who knew that I'm doing shamanic training, because it's got things that are, let's say, it has in common with shamanic practices. Things like I don't know, being buried in graves, and what else was there? Quite a few different things. Kind of a sweat lodge. It's not really a sweat lodge. The various, they're taking mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms. So there's a number of things that has overlap. So people are like, you've got to watch it. And it's been quite fun actually. But I will say, and I think this is the main reason I wanted to mention it, it's really worth watching. But it really so far has very, very little in the way of real similarities between what's being portrayed on the show and true shamanic practices, like night and day difference. So I would recommend watching it. It's a bit of fun and it shows you, I guess, if you just like watching how people interact as a group, particularly when they're being put in kind of like challenging situations, but don't watch it and think, oh, okay, I now knows what goes on, for example, when someone's training shamanism, because it really it's nothing like it. Anyway, and then moving on to what I've been creating, as ever, quite a lot. The thing I really felt was in my heart so deeply at the moment, in terms of like where a lot of my creative energy is flowing, is Wake and Wild Feminine. So this is the 4th year, I believe, of Wake and Wild Feminine. And my goodness, every time has been unrecognizable to the previous times, but I'd say this one more than most. It really, like, each time before it's felt more of an evolution, this one feels like just on a whole nother sort of stratosphere. And it's interesting because the themes that I'm going to be talking about in today's show are actually showing up so powerfully in this particular Wake and Wild Feminine. And something that's really hitting me is the level of depth the women in Wake Wild Feminine are going to in terms of uncovering their shadows, being really willing to express what's coming up for them, how they're being triggered, how they're being triggered by other women in the group, including me, mostly me. um, and it's something that I've seen over time as I'm particularly again creating, or with Jonathan creating group programs, group circles. What's being created is becoming increasingly true. The level of truth that's being revealed is becoming more and more potent with each one. And the reason for that, I believe, and this is how it really does relate to today's topic, is because the level of love that's present, the love that people going through our programs will be met with. And when I say love, and again, I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail when I start recording the main show, but it can sound as though it's just kind of like this quite passive, pleasant thing. And really what I'm talking about is like full acceptance, full welcome, full approval for whatever is coming up and could come up. And when we experience that kind of love to that degree, where we feel safe to go is to a whole nother place than we've been willing or able to go before. And again, when I was pondering what to share with you, I've been creating, I was like, that is such a good example of what I'm going to be talking about. So yeah, this isn't something that just is a kind of like, oh, it's a nice to have, it's nice to be a bit more loving. And it's not just something that has deep empowerment, let's say, for us personally, but it's also what that creates as a welcome to others is beyond anything I've seen created by any other means. Of course, all of this will make a lot more sense once I get into the show, but I really wanted to start with that because what I've seen over and over again are these very real, tangible, practical examples of what gets created when we're able to bring the kind of love that I'm going to be talking about in a moment. And if you've joined us for any of our programs, you're already, I suspect you'll be sitting there nodding because you've experienced this. And I suspect it's something you're beginning to bring to yourself and others in your life. So this is a deeply practical kind of love we're talking about here. Okay, so that brings me really nicely into today's topic of making decisions, how to know if you're being led by fear or love. And as I was just saying when I was doing the pre-show party, this topic, if you don't already know, each topic gets voted on by our Facebook group members. There's a poll, and whatever is the winning topic, that's what gets chosen for the next show. And this one was like a clear winner, which didn't surprise me because the reason Sarah and I chose it as one of the poll topics was the amount of times recently I've been either asked or just been witness to people recognizing how much they're being, I guess, called to make big decisions at the moment. This COVID era in particular is creating a lot of this like, oh, I need to make a choice. Is this the right choice? Is this the right choice? Even if this is the right choice, what's it going to cost me? So there's been a lot of this coming up. I mean, it's just life. It's not to say this is only happening because of this current period, but I would say right now, this is something that I've seen people in this kind of like, oh my goodness, there's this decision to be made. How the hell do I make it in a way that actually is aligned for me? So that's why we decided to put this topic into the poll. And again, that's why I suspect it got voted on, because it's something so alive. And again, in the pre-show party we just did, the conversation that we're having was so rich and so full of very real examples. This isn't just a kind of one of those, I mean, no dissing on this, just to be clear, like I keep knocking the mic, sorry. I'm so down with having kind of like esoteric conversations about the meaning of life, but this is one of those ones where this is something right now that is showing up in a very real way in people's lives and relationships. So it's something that I'm not talking about in a kind of, floaty spiritual way, whilst clearly I'm likely to bring metaphysical principles into that because that's how I see life. I'm doing so with the very real understanding this is something right now that is so alive for human beings and is in some cases causing a lot of fear, a lot of pain, and a lot of challenge. So I just really want to say that at the outset, like I really do get that. I can see how this is creating almost like a snowball effect of kind of like, how do I make a decision? All this fear coming up, and then kind of fear about what if it's the wrong decision. So my intention very much is to meet you where you are and to provide some breadcrumbs that will create a path that allows you to navigate from a place that feels true to you, which again is the only truth there really is. Really is. There is no right way other than your way. So, love. That word love, my goodness. There are some words that have a lot of kind of different meanings and baggage and I guess feelings about. And I think love's got to be up there as like one of those top words that everyone's going to be using it in different ways and have different experience with. So we are probably going to be moving back and forth between talking about it as like personal love and divine love, but really what we're talking about is that way that we are really, when we're talking about love here, talking about it from the sense of being that personal conduit for divine love, for something that is that divine intelligence that's flowing through all of us, this kind of like way that we could be talking about if we were looking at it from the point of view of the Tao, that flow of life, the natural course of things that we get the opportunity to be in alignment with as humans. So we will sometimes feel that as if it has a personal sense of we feel it as something we'll call love, but there is definitely something beyond that that we get a sense of sometimes when we're really open and we can feel that it's something beyond us. And so if that sounds a bit out there and you're not quite sure if you get it from the way I'm talking about, I won't worry too much. I just really want to say at the outset that when we're talking about love, there is something that I think most of us had an experience of, even if we can't define it, that is a place we can navigate from and can allow to flow through us, that ultimately is something that serves everyone. So if that's again not, you're not quite kind of like I'm not sure I get her or not, don't worry too much. I just again really wanted to say at the outset that's largely where I'm going to be coming from when I'm talking about love. And again, this is one of those words that can be quite fluffy and almost kind of like, oh, it's lovey-dovey. And really when I'm using that word love, I'm talking about it from a sense of something very grounded, something we can actually feel, something that we can feel in our bodies and often particularly in our hearts. It isn't a kind of, isn't a, a sickly romantic thing. It's something that we can feel and be guided from. The other distinction I want to make is, and I'm sure this will come up again as I go further into the show, we can really get confused between the idea of like what's kind or what's nice, what would have us accepted versus love. Sometimes conveniently, love can look like something that it is kind or nice. It doesn't always. sometimes it can look anything but that. And that's the times clearly where we're likely to be most challenged to really trust ourselves that it is love. And so I just want to again make that distinction. I'm not at all talking about love from a perspective of it's always going to be nice, it's always going to be kind, it's always going to have other people feel good. It likely won't. I don't mean it likely always won't, but there'll be times where it almost certainly won't look like this nice, good, kind, pleasant, comfortable way to be in the world. So really wanted to make that distinction at the outset. And the quote that I'm going to read next, I think will really underline this. So it's a quote that, again, if you've joined us for anything, any kind of Wake in the Wild circle or program, you would have heard me quote a billion times by now. Love is the law, love under will. And you may already know that's a quote by the infamous Aleister Crowley. And if you have got, I guess, if you're someone who hears his name and reacts like a kind of cat being sprayed by water, like feel free to leave this podcast now. I know quite recently we had someone leave our mailing list because we used a Crowley quote in a newsletter. As I said whenever it was that I quoted him, you know, he was a complex man, and much of what was said about him was untrue. And some of what was said about him that was untrue was actually his own creation, as in a magical creation that he wanted people to believe. Do I agree or like everything that he did? No. Do I think he was a bad man? No. And so his take on love, I think, is something that is so helpful, so clear, so powerful. I will not let the fear that someone's going to hear me quote him and think that I'm a bad person and we are I can't remember what we got called in this particular email, unsubscribe from the newsletter, but let's say I know I'm not a I'm not a Satanist. I don't actually think that yeah, again, without getting into some complexity about Crowley, put it this way: if you feel differently, I will totally respect that, but I'm not going to let the fact that people are going to have strong opinions on him stop me from quoting him on a topic, again, that I think he spoke about so clearly. It's something that is really helpful to look at it through this lens. So I just want to, let me see if I can find something that defines it a little bit more. So, so one of the ways that he meant love was that it means union. And one of the ways it can mean union is a union between a point of view, i.e. you, a human being, and one of the infinite possibilities in experience, as in, if, as I said earlier, everything that's flowing through of it is love, anything that we unite with is love. However, this is where I think the way that Crowley talks about it is particularly helpful. The last part of what I said earlier, love is the law, love under will, that will is what's for us, why we came here, something that is right for that particular person. So there's another part of this quote that says, needless to say, of course, it is necessary in actual practice to use one's judgment in choosing the phenomenon with which one next proposes to assimilate. One should not necessarily shoot oneself or another out of mere curiosity. The right of choice is with the individual. And this is the interesting thing. The more we are aligned with what is actually right for us, with love, it doesn't appear to me that the consequences of that are things that involve taking other people's lives, or even actually impinging or restricting other people's lives. There's another part of a longer quote that I'm going to read that I actually just read in the pre-show party, because when it comes to others, this is the thing that he was clearest most on, that it's, if we're going to live in this way where we're saying what's right for me is the law, that is where I'm going to live from, that really means that we can't be then looking at other people and saying, but that doesn't apply to you, what I want actually overrides what you want. And so this part of a longer quote, in fact it was part of the quote I just read, it said, at the same time, it's remembered that the word of sin is restriction. No other individual has the right to determine or restrict the choice of another, except in such cases as the experience of one includes, for all practical purposes, the experience of the other, as in the case of parenting young children. So what he's saying there is, if we are living in a way that's in alignment for us, and which means that it is actually from love, that includes allowing other people to do the same. And so from there, we create this sense of everyone being kind of in the right lane for them. There isn't the conflict. So that's, I just really wanted to say that at the outset. When I'm talking about love, I'm talking about something that really is this blend between love and what's for us, what's in alignment for our soul, or what might be called true will in magical terms. And so I'm going to be talking about it kind of interchangeably in that way. Sometimes it might sound more like I'm talking about love. Other times it might sound like I'm more talking about that true will. The reason is because really they're one and the same. So that is something I wanted to get really clear as a definition before we dive in. Okay, so as the topic of the show suggests, right now, and this is true actually all the time, but right now in particular, we're being called as human to make choices, make decisions about the direction we take in life. So that's what life is a constant movement through different choices. And then we find from that choice, we're then presented with another choice and another choice. So we can be navigating through those choices in a way that, and this is probably true for most people, from a place where we're being navigating from our conditioning and our wounding, which simply put is making a choice from fear. So that would be making choices from a very limited set of options that appear safe according to our wounding, or that look safe according to our cultural conditioning and what we're told is okay. So that's how most people are making choices, which is why it can seem, if we start to make choices from somewhere else, that in itself can create fear, because it's not how other people are doing things. Most people are waiting to be told what to do, because that's what their conditioning has told them they need to do. Therefore, to start to navigate from somewhere else already looks scary. And I think that's something really worth acknowledging. Just because we are devoting ourselves using whatever language at all. I use the language of devotion. It might be that for you're like, I'm not devoted to anything, but let's just say you have chosen into a path of sovereignty, of your own truth, whatever word you want to give to it. Doesn't mean it's suddenly going to be like that, really simple and easy. And so I think that's why it's really important to recognize it's a courageous act. You even being willing to start to navigate from a sense of what's right for you is already something so worth acknowledging and celebrating. It isn't how most people are living. It is completely understandable that you feel a bit like you're on wobbly legs. Really, really get that. And again, I cannot say strongly enough, like, oh my goodness, acknowledge and celebrate yourself for that. That is huge. Yes, it's going to be tricky at times. Yes, likely you're going to seemingly get it wrong at times. You're going to fall back into making decisions from fear. That's all okay. The main thing is to recognize you have made that deeper choice to start to navigate from somewhere else. So that is the first thing I want to say. That doesn't mean the fear isn't going to go. In some ways, that means the fear is going to be greater because you're going against the grain. And my goodness, the world needs you. Like, you really are the medicine the world needs. So you have my gratitude for making that choice in the first place. So assuming, and then the very fact you're listening to the show, you're someone who already is wanting or is navigating from that place, or is intrigued or interested or feeling called to start to make choices from that place. So again, likely you have those kinds of things already coming up. Again, I know that right now with the COVID period, with all conversations about masks and vaccinations and all these different things, this is something that's really been kind of put in front of people's faces at the moment, a way that you aren't having to make a choice. That is what's required. There is no non-choice available now, as much as sometimes we might want to pretend there isn't. Like, ultimately, you are making a choice, whatever you do. And this isn't, of course, just about what's happened in the COVID period. Some of the examples that people are giving in the Facebook group included things like choices about schooling their children, whether to do homeschooling, whether to send them to school. Other things were to do with jobs, work, places to live. And so these are the kind of bigger things that are coming up for us all the time. And of course, within that, we're also going to have smaller decisions we need to make too. And that often can be a good place to start to practice. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but I just don't want to give the impression like this is all about those really big choices. Once we decide that this is how we're going to live, once we devote that path of soul, we are given the opportunity to make all decisions from that place. So that includes whether we're going to accept an invitation to a party or not. It really does mean that we can navigate everything from that place. So again, it's the big decisions that we're really kind of feeling like, I need to know. But it is actually all decisions that it's worth recognizing fall into this same place that we can navigate from. Okay, let me take a mouthful of my drink and then see where to go next. It's actually a really yummy topic. I'm glad that we're talking about this. Right. Okay. So, I'm going to start by saying something that I guess really is the foundation to this. That if we don't have a sense of what's for us, it's going to be really hard to navigate according to that, which sounds blooming obvious. But I know from all the work that I've done with people, most of us don't, until we've started looking here, actually have a sense of what we want. One of the first practices that we give people when they enter one of our programs will be something that allows people to start to get a sense of that deep longing that they have, those deep desires, that vision they have. And for many of them, that's going to be something that they really haven't given themselves the space to do before. And there's really understandable reasons for that. I mean, one of the biggest is that they are scared that if they start to look at what's for them, they're going to then need to take action on that, which is going to be really disruptive to their lives. So recognize, whilst it might sound really simple, like, what is it you want? That in itself creates fear, because it's this sense of like, oh gosh, what if what I really want isn't what I've already got? So go gently with that. If you've already got a sense of those like deep, authentic soul desires, great, we'll work from there. If you don't, that's the place to start. And if you would like some practices that you can use to start to uncover that, let us know. Comment in the Facebook group or drop us an email, because I'm quite happy to invite you into some practices. But that's the place to start. Really uncover what's for you. And this, of course, is something that moves and evolves over time, but you'll know what's for you now, which is the place to be navigating from. So without that sense of what's for us, I don't know what's for you, because that is the place to start. So assuming you've already got that sense, you have a sense of those deep desires, and that in itself can be a place that we become more, let's say, masterful at being able to really know, is this one of those deep soul desires, or is this just another way of, for example, me getting approval? um so that's in itself work to really be able to know, like, are these desires what's really for me, or is this another way that shadow is kind of contorting something so that it gets a shadow need met, let's say. So we don't have time to go deep into that, but that's something I just really want to say. We really need to do the work to make sure those deep soul desires are actually true. From there, that allows us to have this sense of what's for us. And the way that we know, like moment to moment, is we learn to know how that energetic feels in our body. There isn't a shortcut to this. This is something we need to be willing to learn the language of that energetic in our body, where when we're presented with a choice, we know first and foremost, again, what that desire is, but we start to know when we're feeling that sense of fear come in, or an openness come in, that sense of love. So we get better and better at determining that. And that's why it can actually be good to start with those smaller choices. So if, for example, I'm going to give examples are going to sound like it's absolute. Of course, there's all sorts of nuances here, but just so it's helpful to navigate with something. It could be that you have this sense of, I don't know, wanting to build a community, have more connections with people, and you have this really deep soul desire that's there present for you. And then you are invited to some kind of, I don't know, gathering that's something that really speaks to you. And in that moment, you're going to be able to feel what's coming up for you. And it's again a really sometimes subtle in the early days, but that's the place to start with those smaller decisions and starting to get a sense of, is this for me? And notice that sometimes that's when we'll get that those fears come up that may actually be something we want to work through. It could be, for example, that we actually feel into it and, like, this isn't aligned for me. This isn't the kind of gathering, the kind of venue, whatever it might be, that's for me. And what I can feel is coming up is fear of what people will say if I say no. And so these are the things to start to notice. This all will be felt in the body. We can be so conditioned in our culture to try and use our minds for everything, to work things out logically. That isn't going to be the way that you can navigate if you're wanting to navigate from this place of what's for you. It's felt. We get the sense of what this feels like in our body. So again, starting with those smaller things, feeling, is this a line for me? What's coming up in terms of fear? Okay, so this is this need for example, not upsetting people. Okay, is that something I want to allow myself to be compelled by? Or actually, am I going to still, I don't know, say no, for example, even though it might have me not approved of, because I can feel that's what's in alignment with me and that's what I'm devoted to. I'm devoted to living my truth. Just really notice those things and how they're feeling for you. So let me have a look. And again, just to be really clear, we will have choices that come up that will come with a cost. You probably heard me talk about before what I call the sovereign price and the victim price. And what I mean by this is, as we start to really get a sense of what's for us, if we start to navigate from that sense of, this is right for me, this is right for me, and if I trust that if something's right for me, it is from love, it's also what's going to serve, even though some people might not like it. And it's those times we have a sense of, okay, this is for me, and people aren't going to like it. we get the opportunity, that makes it sound really nice, doesn't it? The opportunity to pay the sovereign price. Sovereign price is going to be whatever it is that we fear could come up as an impact, let's say, of us making that choice. So going back to the example we've just been using, if we were to say no to an invitation, knowing it might upset people, this is again a very small example, that would be the sovereign price of making that choice. The alternative to that is paying the victim price, which is to go against what you know is for you. So accepting an invitation that you know isn't really something that's aligned for you. You're not going to have to pay the sovereign price because you're not going to upset anyone, but you're going to be paying the victim price of doing something that you know isn't an alignment for you. That is something that, again, I say, if you're doing that from sovereignty, if you're making that a sovereign choice, you're still sovereign, but be honest with yourself, be true to yourself. You are choosing to pay the victim price. So this is something you will get more and more skillful at, more and more aware of, more and more discerning, recognizing, okay, I thought that was sovereign. I can now see that really looking back, I was kind of like managing not to see that actually it wasn't, but I didn't want to pay the sovereign price. So that's something that's so important. And in fact, one of the questions that just came up in the pre-show party, let me just find this one. It was talking about afterwards, when we make a decision and then go back and look back and think, you know what, maybe it was from fear. Maybe there was definitely some fear in the mix. Really, really important. I can't say this strongly enough. In fact, what I'm about to say goes through all sorts of other aspects of this work. If you make yourself wrong, if you blame and shame yourself from something that you've done, as soon as you then blame and shame yourself, you're right back into fear again. You're right back into this victim triangle that I'm constantly talking about. So you've gone back into the persecutor and you're persecuting yourself. And in order to do so, you have to be being motivated by fear. So watch out for that too. That's not to say, okay, so that means everything's going to go swimmingly. If you've done something you think was a wrong decision and was from fear, there may well be then things you need to clear up. But first and foremost, the invitation here for you is to recognize that beating yourself up for it, blaming yourself from it, is going to create more restriction, more closing, more fear. So as soon as you start to notice yourself looking back and saying, oh my goodness, I see that I actually think I did make that from fear. The invitation is first and foremost to acknowledge yourself, that you must be sovereign to even be having that awareness, and to bring love to yourself in that noticing. That's what's going to open you up to make the next choice from love. It doesn't work any other way. Okay, so how am I doing for time? This is ending up being a long one. As a link to that, someone asked, how easy is it to get back on back on course after the bad, in quote marks, decision is made? I feel like it throws me so far off course. It's so difficult to get back on track. So I was talking to Ryan, my magic teacher, about something similar earlier, funny enough, and he said it really beautifully. He said something like, this is paraphrasing, detours, meaning kind of detours off the path that's aligned for you. Detours create contrast creates desire, and then desire creates that kind of evolution of us. And I think that's such a good way of looking at it. And I don't think it's like a good way, like it is actually how it works. So notice if you do feel that you've taken that seeming wrong path, that is that detour that allows you to experience life from a place that's not alignment. From there, you get the opportunity to recognize, you know what, from here, I can see that my soul really desires this experience instead. as you empower those desires towards what is aligned for you, you get the opportunity to create that evolution of who you are. You get the opportunity to integrate and expand. So there is, from that lens, it can sound a bit of a cliche, there's no wrong choices, there's no wrong paths, but there is a very real richness when we're able to see it from this perspective that we are, I guess, where we're meant to be. And from here, we are able to navigate from here with love, from here with what's in alignment for us, from here with what our desires are telling us about where we've ended up. And there we get the opportunity to navigate back. And it is, the timing thing's interesting. Like, it feels like it throws me so far. Of course, it's difficult to get back on track. And I think that can be true, again, when we're busy making ourselves wrong for how we ended up where we've got to. It can be just, I'm not going to put a time on it, like, oh, suddenly it's so much faster. All I can say is the possibilities available to us when we're able to, again, navigate from love, as love, bringing love to ourselves. From there, possibilities that arise are beyond our imaginings when we're coming from fear. The ability we have to orientate ourselves back into alignment are magical, quite frankly. So I don't think it's something that we need to fear in the way of like, oh my goodness, what if I do make one of those decisions that's from fear? We have the opportunity to go again and again and again, and being able to learn in a way that we can bring love to allows us to use that as or in service of our evolution. Okay, so what else do I want to cover before I finish on this episode? So so I've talked about the sovereign price and the victim price, talked about the aftermath. So I touched on this before, but I just want to say this again. When it involves other people, that's where I think, again, and most things are going to involve other people. Hey, we only exist in relationships. So sometimes these things can involve other people, as in it directly involves them, as in our decision is actually a decision that's our kind of like involves our whole family, or it's a decision that will impact other people. And so, I mean, like secondhand, as in they're going to have opinions or feelings about it, doesn't necessarily directly involve their life. And this is where, coming back to what Crowley said, I think so helpful. The more we get that deep awareness that what's for us is from love, is for good, the more we trust that the same is true for other people, the less we are making wrong, judging what other people are deciding, and the more compassion, maybe space we have to also then give ourselves. This happens all the time. The more we're able to give ourselves that space of, you know what, if this is for me, it also needs to serve the whole. It will. It's just how it works. And the same is true for someone else. The more we're able to allow that to happen out there and in here. So when we have these decisions come up where we're feeling like this is really aligned for me, and I really have felt in whether this is authentic, whether this is a desire that is really truly in alignment. And yes, it comes with these fears that's going to require me to take the sovereign price. And we're in relationship with someone else that we can see, or we are able to see as sovereign, even if, as we all are going to be sort of in and out of sovereignty. The more we can have that space to allow ourselves, each person in that dynamic, to navigate from that place. We don't have that need to control other people's way of responding to anything. We trust that they have that opportunity just like we do. Is there anything else that I think is helpful to say on that? This is why, actually, and again, I'm saying this as if with the understanding we're going to not do this sometimes. But this is why being able to navigate from the place of what truly is for us, is truly from love, means we don't then end up in these a controlling, manipulating way of being with other people. It means that we don't convince people to do something to suit our needs, when our needs actually were quite shadowy and from fear. So that's when we can influence, definitely can influence other people on a course of action, when we look back and we can recognize, you know what, that doesn't feel good, or that hasn't worked out well, or I feel responsible, that's kind of now blown up in our faces. If we track back, typically we'll recognize, oh yeah, that really was being energized by fear. That's why I feel this sense of like ickiness and responsibility. That's why potentially they were kind of not really listening to what was for them, because they were listening to me. And everyone has the opportunity to take responsibility. I'm not saying that from a perspective of you then ought to take complete responsibility and they were a victim to you. Everyone is sovereign, everyone has the same opportunity. And it's an opportunity for you to recognize where you were out of alignment, where you were being energized by fear. And now, in this moment, choose from love. You can't go back blaming yourself for what you did. Again, I can't say this strongly enough, because humans will do this. Going back and trying to like, oh my goodness, if only I hadn't done that, isn't going to work. Until we've figured out time travel, that's not going to work. So bring love to the fact you can recognize that what you did then did influence someone to do something that actually wasn't in alignment. And from here, you get the opportunity to be responsible for that and make a different choice that's from love. Okay, is there, I always get to the end of this and think like, did I actually end up talking about anything? And I think I have, because I've been talking for this amount of time. But let me just sort of flick through people's comments in the pre-show party to see if there's anything else that I feel might be helpful. Okay, I'm going to read one more Crowley quote, because I think this is a nice clear one to end on. I hope it might open up another whole can of worms. Elsewhere it is written, surely for our great comfort, love is the law, love under will. This is to be taken as meaning that while will is the law, the nature of that will is love. But this love is, as it were, a byproduct of that will. It does not contradict or supersede that will. And if apparent contradictions should arise in any crisis, it is the will that will guide us aright. So I think that is a really helpful one to end on. I think so anyway. When we get, and again, this is something that the longer we are willing to do this work, to have this working on us, the more we get the sense of what that will is, what's for us, what our soul is calling us to. And yes, sometimes it can look like it's not loving. Sometimes we can have other people absolutely tell us it's not loving. Sometimes we think like, oh my goodness, I wish it was something different, because this is going to cause other people pain. If we trust that if it really is for us, if it really is our truth, it is love. That's the place to navigate from. I think that's all I've got to say on this topic for now. If there's anything at all you would like from me on this topic, and again, it could be further resources, it could be questions you've got, comments, do please let us know. I'm always happy to come back and explore on these things further, particularly something like this. I mean, my goodness, love or fear, does it get any more foundational than that? Okay, so in terms of aligned actions, what occurs to me that I could offer you today? I think first and foremost, it is, if you haven't already made that choice, that kind of foundational choice to start to navigate from this place, that's the place to choose first. Like, of all the decisions you can make that decision first. Is this a place that you want to navigate from? If you're a yes on that, or if you've already made that choice, the next thing, as I said, is to get clear on what that is that you're being called to. What are those deep soul desires? So that's the place to go next. If you already have a sense of that, then recognize that you are being guided and having opportunities to be guided within all of the time. You don't need to wait for these like really big life or death choices. Start from really simple things like what flavor ice cream to have, whether to write, I don't know, an article on something or not, whether to accept an invitation or not. Start to get a sense of how that feels in your body. So when you are making the life or death decisions, you already have a sense of, that is what this feels like. I know what that means. That means I'm a yes. So make this easy for yourself, make it fun for yourself. It can be so enjoyable to start to notice the way these things feel. I think that's everything I can offer you in terms of next aligned actions. And I'd love to hear which of those you're going to take action on. If you would like to work with us in one of those crucibles I've been mentioning, we've got a couple of options coming up in the next few months. The first one is the new evolution of Wake Wild Sovereign, and that begins in November. There's a few spaces left on that. So if you feel you're being called to walking this path of sovereignty, firstly, I acknowledge you. Probably one of the most amazing choices you possibly could make, in my view. Go check out primalhappiness.co/sovereign and double check that URL is right. Actually, give me a moment. I know it's not particularly slick, but some of our links are actually different to others, and I can't remember if that's one of the ones that actually I've given you the right link for or not. No, it is right. It is Sovereign. Excellent. And if it looks like it's something for you, you can book a call with me or Jonathan, and we'll discuss that with you. See if that is actually a good fit for you. Or if something else is, whether that be one of our programs or something else entirely. So that's something we can support you with. The other crucible coming up, which I think is coming in February, if I have that right, so February next year, and that is Waking the Wild Medicines. We did the very first Waking Wild Medicine this year, and oh my goodness, it was powerful. And so it is back. And it is also going to be amazing. This is very much for people who, I'd say particularly those people who are kind of change workers, the magical people, the intuitive ones, the healers, and allowing them to do their soul work to really become that medicine that they are. So if that is calling you, go along to start again at primalhappiness.co/medicine. And same thing again, if it looks like it could be for you, reach out and we can arrange a call for you to explore if it is indeed for you. What else? So if you are watching this in our Facebook group or on YouTube and you haven't yet checked out our podcast, go do that. We've got something like, I don't know, probably coming up 340 episodes now. And so that's at primalhappiness.co/podcast. And if you're listening to this on the podcast and you're not a member of our group, go join our group, and that's at facebook.com/groups/primal happiness. And I would really recommend that. Apart from anything, as I said at the start, you can then join me for next month's pre-show party. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're listening to the replay or you listen to the podcast. I so appreciate you. I would love to know what you took from this, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Lots of love. Mwah. Goodbye.